Costa Rica crazy.
Ooh.
I wanted to write a eulogy on my decade in Costa Rica. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to lay to rest a decade of my existence on this earth. We are not here to discuss the mistakes that led to my time in Costa Rica. We are here to bury that time together. There are so many stories, so many little and sometimes large events that I will only be able to cover a few. The tourists at my desk would see the breaking crystal waves and ask, "What brought you to Costa Rica?" And I learned to lie, eventually. It was difficult for me because when asked a direct question, I generally give a direct answer. But no tourist wants to hear, "Oh, my ex was an unhappy guy and I moved here to make him happy, and a month down here and he decided that I was what was making him unhappy, and he left me down here with 2 little babies." No one wants to hear that. They are on vacation, deliriously happy to be in the sun, and the number one side effect of a third world country is insanity. Chapter 1, where everyone around me goes insane. We'd been in the hotel for a month when Mario started to leave the kids and I alone, and he went to talk to everyone else. We stayed in the hotel room, and I couldn't speak Spanish, and it was close enough to his native French that it was easy for him, just a third language. And I was miserable. I hated living in a hotel room. I found myself hiding in the room to weep and feeling embarrassed because the housekeepers would come in to clean. So I took the kids and I went back to see my parents. It was at this point that the bartender we'd just hired started to introduce my future ex-husband to all those beautiful prostitutes and asked him to come out with him and his friends. In Mario's defense, he was too stupid to know they were hookers. And I don't believe he cheated on me. But the marriage was over because we'd moved to Costa Rica to make him happy, and he was still unhappy. 3 months in, I found myself single in a foreign country with a 2-year-old, a 6-year-old, far from my friends, far from my family, isolated by a lack of language, and running a business I didn't know how to run. Mario's last act before he left was to rent the restaurant part of my hotel off to a guy called John. And I was left running the hotel. My husband of 10 years had left me and his daughters. And I told him that I thought we should try again, that we should put it all back together for the sake of our kids. And he told me that after being with a Latina, he could never go back to being with me. And then he told me that I loved our children too much.
What?
And that we couldn't stay together just for the kids. A year later, when he changed his mind and wanted to put the marriage back together for the kids, I found it easy to say no. For some reason, his words had never left my head. If getting back together for the family hadn't been a decent reason when the baby was 2, it just wasn't going to be enough when she was 3. Now, marriages fall apart in Costa Rica. It's just what they do. Most of the time, the expat men stay, and their wives leave with the kids. My friend Cindy showed up at my hotel to hide with her children as her marriage ended. Her husband had discovered the joys of cheap cocaine, and while high had hit her and then threatened to kill her and their 3 children. So she'd come to my hotel to hide out for the 3 days it took for her parents to send her enough money to fly him, herself, and the girls home. When her husband came looking in the hotel for her, she decided to go and face him, and I took her children and mine to the corner store for ice cream. Mine was not the worst breakup story. Franklin, my night guard, he's not from Costa Rica, he's Nicaraguan. And I always thought that his name was Fabrizio, because that's what was on his ID, that was the bank account I put his money into. And you know, he's rather a cute man with the face of a boy and a little daughter he adores. He rides everywhere on his bicycle, and since his baby was a newborn, he's taken her with him everywhere. Maria, every woman in Costa Rica is called Maria. Maria is his wife, and she has an older child to another man, more or less. Apparently, Fabrizio's real name is Franklin. Fabrizio is Franklin's brother. And since his brother had a work permit to live in Costa Rica, and went back to Nicaragua, Franklin grabbed his brother's papers.
Oh, damn.
The other thing Franklin apparently grabbed was his brother's wife. Maria's older daughter is apparently Franklin's niece. This sweet-faced little employee stole his brother's entire life. One day, Franklin told me that if you were in love, anything was justified. And I told him it wasn't. But I'd never been in love at that point. Chapter 2, when my clients were crazy. Over 10 years, there were so many clients, so many nameless faces, normal people, nice people, sweet people, happy people who were having a good time. Of course, these are not the ones I remember. I remember the overweight, middle-aged lady who, while checking in, pulled out a long plastic accordion of photos taken on her last vacation where she had met Bill. He's the overweight guy in the middle 8 photos. Who looks embarrassed to have his photo taken. Who, he was really nice, but they didn't stay in touch, and she wanted to come to Costa Rica with him, but he stopped returning her calls, and she wished they'd come together, and the last trip was a really great trip, and she was sure Costa Rica would be another great trip, and she'd make a lot of new friends. But we both knew that the trip was not about making friends. It was to find love, to find a connection, and she wasn't going on vacation to explore the world, she was going on vacation to escape herself. And as soon as we finished our transaction and I had properly inspected every photo, I peeled her off me, and she wandered away and sat in the bar where she pulled out her photos for another unsuspecting guest. Loneliness, of course, is not limited to people who are traveling alone. Adam and his wife were on their honeymoon. He'd checked them in. He was in his late 30s, maybe 40, and the room wasn't my nicest. He'd booked a cheap room for his honeymoon with his child bride. She was probably 20, maybe, but as she stared at her cell phone, she had the petulant pout of a teenager. It was Easter time and we were full, so we gave him the best room we had, which had 2 double beds. Right after he checked in, he came down and said this was his honeymoon, and he really needed a room with 1 bed. Now, personally, I messed up 2 beds every night I could on my honeymoon, but we tried our best to accommodate him, and he told him he'd be able to move the next day to a room with 1 bed. The next day, we saw Adam come down, eat breakfast, go for a walk in the sun, go for a swim, go back to the room, and move all their stuff to the new room, come for lunch, take his food back for her, go to the beach, sit for hours on a beach chair reading alone, and go back to the room. And the next day, he came to us. She doesn't have internet in the new room. Can we have a room with 2 beds this time and internet? She needed internet. She couldn't possibly come out of the room to use the internet. The first room had internet. Could they please have 2 beds and internet again right now? And I moved them again. She came out of the room to be on the phone, and he came out of the room to read and stare at the ocean with a look of resigned horror, and I never saw them speak to each other, or touch each other, or look at each other. My friend Desi was staying at the hotel. She'd arrived reeling from an encounter with her ex-husband, and she was feeling particularly alone and vulnerable. At the same time, we had a group of Russians staying. Now, the strangest thing about this group, apart from the fact that we never had Russian guests, was that they were all men. Straight men, if my senses were right, and the 5 of them were sharing 1 large room. And they never left the hotel. They never went to the beach. They never got into a swimsuit. They sat in the restaurant, drinking beer and eating. And when they went to pay, it was always the 50-something-year-old man who seemed to be in charge who would pay. He would pull out a roll of cash the size of a can of beans and peel off hundreds. It was obviously a little odd. Desi ended up sleeping with one of the younger guys in the group. In between telling her that he loved her and screwing her brains out, he said that his boss was Russian mafia. And there was some kind of deal about taking stolen American cars through Costa Rica to be shipped into Russia, and that he was a prisoner of the boss, and that his family back in Russia would be hurt if he didn't do what the boss wanted, and the only way he would be free is if she would marry him and take him to America with her. Now, I don't actually believe the car story, mostly because we were not close to any port or harbour. I'm guessing what they were really moving was something a little more portable, something that the fishing boats can go out at night fishing for: cocaine. And Desi almost fell for him and his story, so I guess he was either really good in bed or her loneliness was deeper than I'd imagined. The German man checked in while my German manager wasn't there. He handed over a German passport, but he didn't want to speak to me. He wouldn't speak to my daughter, who'd been at the desk, so she'd called me over. And in the end, he wouldn't speak to either of us, but he would speak to Marconi, Julie's boyfriend. Not that they had a conversation. A couple of words, but Marconi told him the price in Spanish, and he said, "Sí," and handed over the money. On his sign-in form, he wrote nothing. We filled out the passport number and the name. The next day, Anne, my German manager, was there, and he came to the desk and she tried to talk to him in German. And he acted like he'd never heard German before. And she tried English, nothing. She used Spanish, asking if he was staying another night, and he said, "Sí," and paid again. Now I say that he said, as if he spoke something, but it was more like he whispered a little groan of air escaping from a helium balloon. His hair was blonde, white blonde, and Anne tried throwing words at him in Polish, Czechoslovakian, and I tried French, and he just looked at us, oblivious. And Anne said he couldn't possibly be German because he didn't respond as if he knew one word. She said he reminded her of men who'd just been released after 40 years in a gulag. That night he came to dinner, and the waitress brought him a menu, but he wouldn't talk to her. So Marconi went over to help the waitress, and he gave his order to Marconi. He simply would not speak to a woman, any woman, and he ordered the whole snapper, and it was brought out to him. It was the first time we'd seen him eat anything. He'd spent the last 2 days locked in his room. Now, when I first got to Costa Rica, I wouldn't eat the snapper. It's Pacific red snapper, and the fishermen catch it just off the coast. They bring it into the hotels and the restaurants, and I wouldn't eat it because I didn't want to eat something with a head. They cook it whole. They catch them, they're about 2 pounds, and they cut wedges into the side. They rub salt into their flesh, and they flash fry them in hot oil. The skin turns crispy, and the meat inside is tender and sweet, and it's unbelievably good. And I can't believe my distaste for eating an entire animal stopped me from eating it for so long. What the restaurant made him was a whole snapper set next to a rice and a salad. And what he did with it was a horrible waste of a fish's life. He took the fish and the salad and the rice, and he built a structure. He didn't eat a bite, but he took the entire fish and turned its bones into building blocks for a perverse food art cathedral. He didn't touch anything with his fingers, and it took the better part of an hour arranging the rising sculpture with his knife and his fork. And then he dropped money on the table, enough to cover the bill, and he left. And the next day he disappeared from our hotel. And we saw him a week later walking around the city north of us, and we tried to remember exactly where we'd seen him last for when Interpol came looking for him. Jack Cross is one of the few customers that I can remember by first and last name. He's also one of the few customers who made it to the Banned for Life list. Jack, like many older gentlemen who retire to Costa Rica and find themselves single, had many young girlfriends. Possibly one-night girlfriends, maybe weekend-long girlfriends. He lived in 5 hours of drive away in the capital, and every few months he'd show up with a new girlfriend and stay for a weekend in our best room, drunk, stoned, loud, and enjoying his paid companion. This is not an unusual thing for a hotel room, and in general my policy is you can do anything you want in your room, but if you are a hooker, and I can tell that when you're renting the room, I'm sorry, you can't have a room because I don't want you doing your business out of my establishment.
There you go.
But if you are a dirty old man or young man and you rent a room, I am not going to tell you who you can bring into it. And for that matter, if you're a dirty old woman or a silly young girl who rents a room, I am not going to tell you that the boy who was nice to you at the bar is actually a thief. There are some things you need to learn for yourself the next day after you sober up and the buzz wears off. Jack was banned after the 2 a.m. incident. I mean, it's okay to do what you want until you start waking up the other guests. At 2 a.m., Jack apparently decided he didn't like his girlfriend du jour anymore. And he kicked her drunk, stoned ass out of his room and onto the balcony outside the hotel. Where, after she screamed and howled, she proceeded to call the police. Because you see, prostitution is legal in Costa Rica, and what's worse than being kicked out of bed at 2 a.m. was that he hadn't paid her. So, by 3:30, because they don't come quickly, the police had showed up, and she had not stopped screaming the entire time. The night guard had tried, and I'd been called to come in from my house to stop it. And Jack was obviously in a drunken coma because he wasn't opening the door. I opened the door with the master keys and let the woman and the police in. And after some negotiation with the threat of arrest, Jack renewed his relationship with the lovely lady, and I assume paid her price. Of course, not everyone who sleeps with a hooker is an asshole. Some of them are genuine idiots. I got into work and the housekeepers met me at the door and told me the man in room 5 had to talk to someone who spoke English. And I knocked on the door and a small voice asked in English, "Who is it?" And I said, "Shelley from the front desk." And he came to the door and opened it a crack. I could barely see his face, but he was young, 20-something, and the room was dark. "Please," he said, "I need help. I need to check out now. But first call the police, bring them to my room." I didn't ask why. I just knew he was serious. So I went and called the police, and they came in about half an hour. They'd been just down the beach checking out girls in bikinis, so they were close. I escorted the police up to his room and found out what the problem was. He hid behind the door, telling the police what had happened, and I translated as needed. Apparently the night before, he'd sat down in the bar across the way and talked to some very nice girl. And then he'd brought her back and everything was okay, and she left. And she looked like a nice girl, and he thought she was a nice girl. And he didn't know her name or where she was now, but at some point her brothers showed up. And they told him to pay or they would kill him. That he couldn't use their sister for free. And the interesting thing was that he believed the brothers, and that he was genuinely terrified. And he made the police help him take his things to his car so that he could flee. Some people going on vacation lonely and do crazy things to fill the hole that going on a vacation doesn't cure. And some people are just assholes. Chapter 3. People come for the monkeys and the sloths, but they're far more likely to run into mosquitoes or fire ants. People who come to the tropics and complain about a gecko or an ant should get on the plane and go the fuck home. Immediately. Don't be telling me how you love nature and then be scared of a spider. Don't be saying how much you love to see a monkey and an anteater and then want to spray Raid on every little bug you see. Being by the ocean rather than in the jungle, there are less jungle creatures at the hotel. But yes, we see monkeys. A young male howler monkey showed up one day in the middle of our garden, and he sat in a tree and he started to scream. To start with, all the tourists came to take photos, but by day 3, the whole screaming at the top of his lungs thing was getting a little much. And we were very happy when he left. All I could think was that in howler monkey packs, the males get kicked out by dad when they're big enough, so they don't impregnate their mother or their sisters. And he was a teenage boy, and he was very upset at having to leave home. Now at the hotel, the majority of the animals we see are related to the ocean or are theoretically domesticated. Poisonous marine toads the size of dinner plates hop through the restaurant.
Whoa.
Seasonally, big palm-sized